Welcome to episode 7 of the With Ingram series of podcasts. I'm Philip Ingram, and today I'm talking about pandemics and COVID-19 with Ian Thornton-Trump, the CISO with Cyjax. Warning, you might actually learn something. Ian, hey, it's really good to talk to you. Can you tell us?
Great to talk to you,
Phil. Can you tell the listeners out there a little bit about yourself? Introduce who you are. It's better you introduce yourself than me.
Well, I'm kind of like you, I guess, in some senses, but maybe not as ultimately successful in my military career. My background is military and law enforcement. I spent a year with the Royal Canadian Mounted Police as a criminal intelligence analyst. I did military intelligence and then military policing as an MP. But, to be honest, my last military assignment was as a brigade public affairs officer, where I sort of learned the art of speaking, presenting, and talking to the media. So although I've been involved in security and even on the technical side for a fair amount of my career, it's really been the communication and discussion around the issues that security seems to permeate in our daily lives, in our work lives, and even in our personal lives.
Yeah. So what brought a Canadian to London then?
Well, way back about 5 years ago, I was involved with a Scottish startup, originally called Hound Dog, metamorphosized into a company called GFI, which then became Logic Now and was acquired by SolarWinds MSP.
Mm-hmm.
I was very fortunate in the fact that my mother had been born in Poland, so I managed to get a Polish passport, which gave me a lot of flexibility because as a Canadian, you pretty much are stuck with a visa, tier 2 visa, and then so you don't have flexibility. But as a result of that, a wonderful situation, I was able to go on to work as a contractor for HSBC, at Ladbrokes Coral Group, and AmTrust Financial Services, which is a giant multi-billion-dollar financial corporation.
Yeah. So brilliant. And I presume, like the rest of us, you're on complete lockdown. What are you making of this COVID-19 pandemic?
Well, I mean, it's especially hard, I think, for me because I love to be out at the events and conferences. I love to be meeting people. I really love to spend time with students. I was very lucky to be able to get up to Securite before sort of everything went sideways and spend some time with that next generation of cybersecurity professionals. So for me, I feel like a community ambassador, community outreach person. So, a lot of meetings, a lot of teams. It's been hard, and it's been hard on a lot of people. And I think, I've struggled a bit, I would say, with understanding the good intentions of a government, but at the same time, the unbelievable lack of preparedness and the legacy of social policy cuts and cuts to the National Health Service. I kind of feel that we should have seen this coming. And you and I are both from the intelligence services as a background. There were plenty of indications and warnings that we can point to in history, from the Spanish flu forward to SARS and avian flu, et cetera, et cetera. So I kind of feel let down, to be honest. I kind of feel that this was something that we should have been more prepared for than we inevitably ended up being.
Well, it's interesting. I've looked at a lot of the local resilience forum sites and the threat assessments, and the number one risk that they have at the top of all of those was a pandemic flu type virus breaking out around the world. But if it's not just us that have been unprepared or not prepared to the right level for this, it seems to be across the globe.
Yeah, and I wonder if that potentially was a symptom of the chronic underfunding and struggle that the UN has had with countries to pay their bills.
Yeah.
Because don't forget, the WHO is funded by the UN, And if the UN isn't getting their money in a timely manner, obviously all of their agencies are obviously starved for capability and funds. And then also, I feel like because of the politics involved with the UN,
Uh-huh.
China and the United States being at odds and sort of trading, very public trade wars.
Yeah.
I feel like that led to a climate of holding the information about the emergence of this pandemic a little too close to the table, and not allowing the publication of it for fear of impacting sort of the economic relationship the
Yeah.
United States has with China.
Well,
So
well, yeah.
I have a, you know,
Go on. I was going to say it's very interesting to see Donald Trump calling it the Chinese virus, and then we'll do a bit of conspiracy theory stuff here. China gets it first, and China gets out of it first, and Chinese business is the first to restart again. Surprise, surprise, the only level 4 lab that just happened to be doing research into the SARS virus happened to be in Wuhan. What do you make of the conspiracy theorists that are saying that this was actually a Chinese construct?
So this comes down to the media's obsession with, the 24-hour news cycle. We need research and backstories to determine whether or not it was somebody eating bat soup.
Yep.
If it was 5G Huawei gear that somehow created this, if this was in fact a bioweapons experiment gone wrong. Like, literally, there are numerous avenues here. And I think, we can say the media abhors a vacuum, and that vacuum is going to be filled with the most bizarre type of conspiracy theories in order to fill the lack of facts. And the media is looking forward into the 24 hours, but is very quickly to relinquish the beginnings of these kind of things to historians.
Yep. Yeah. Now, but the one thing I think we could probably agree on is that the statistics that have come out of China are probably wildly off. Do you think that has contributed to the lack of response through the rest of the world at the very early stages and us this turning into a global pandemic?
Yeah, so a couple of thoughts on that. First of all, when you look at China and you look at Italy, they have some similarities, and it makes sense to see how hard they were hit. The similarities being a huge population of smokers and smoking, an aged population, a population that is quite senior to a lot of other populations. So obviously, sad as it is, old people die. They die of a variety of different things. In this particular case, this flu seems to be excessively lethal towards folks, and especially towards people that are that have some sort of health complication or a self-inflicted vulnerability, such as smoking or vaping. And so when I sort of see these things, I the one question that I'm asking is, okay, we had 150, 200 people die because of this flu in the week. How many people regularly die? And what I think we need to do is take a step back, and rather than sort of ratcheting it up and saying, oh, we had 150 people, it's going to be 300 tomorrow. We need to look at the full deck, as you were, of what are people actually dying from. And so it's so difficult in my mind to equate this virus with the amount of heart disease, for instance, that kills people, or the amount of household accidents that kills people. And to put some perspective on it. And this is where I feel like the media, there was no impeachment story anymore. There was no Brexit story anymore. They needed a big story. It's I think overly sensationalized. Like Sky News is just continuous coronavirus coverage from start to finish.
Oh,
I'm
they
not
all are.
downplaying.
Yeah.
I'm not downplaying the seriousness of this disease, but I somewhat wonder if this fear, uncertainty, and doubt, is a harbinger of a future where we run from one crisis to the next crisis, being driven there by a somewhat hysterical media.
Well, yeah, it's interesting, and they're relying on statistics and trying to compare different countries' statistics to pull out percentages of who's surviving and who's not, and all the rest of it. When every country's got a different testing regime. Some countries have been accurate in saying
different testing regime, different hygiene standards, different access to medical capability. This is a very difficult thing to, and I think this is the argument that's going on in the United States right now, is that they're becoming the epicenter of the disease. But the question is their capitalistic healthcare system or approach, is this detrimental versus a public access program similar to what was found in Italy and Spain? And the real question is, we don't know what the outcome is going to be. You have these talking heads going on CNN talking about a number of ventilators that they're going to need. These are, I'm going to say, estimates. And they're estimates based on data that hasn't been normalized for the capabilities of the particular country. You can't compare the Chinese healthcare system to the NHS.
Well, and the level of
to the US healthcare system.
And the level of population control that the Chinese can impose compared to the level of population control that can be imposed on a liberal democracy, for example. It's very difficult when you get into these comparative pieces. And because the virus is new, they don't seem to be able to understand properly how it's promulgated throughout the population and throughout people's bodies and all the rest of it. Why is there a difference between Italy, the UK, and Germany, say, where Germany, a large proportion of the population do smoke and do vape, but they seem to have a much smaller death rate. There's damn lies and statistics, and I think we're seeing that coming out minute by minute across the press.
I agree with that. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, do you think Donald Trump's got it right in saying he's going to have this kicked by Easter?
Yeah, no, I don't think so. I think I agree with sort of the consensus of the scientific community that these type of infections usually come in waves. That a significant level of immunity. But we need to understand something about the American system and Donald Trump's motivations here. They are purely economic in that for him and his prospects of being reelected are directly tied to the performance of the stock market. Whether or not that's accurate or not, it's certainly what he seems to believe. So, when you have your own subject matter expert contradict you publicly and say it's absurd to even think about putting people back to work by Easter or packing the churches with church-going people in Easter, that's pandering to his supporters. The idea that you have who are supposed to be, the representatives of society in the United States publicly suggesting that people of 50 years and above should return back to work so that they can sacrifice their lives to preserve the economy for their children is ridiculous.
Well, it's crazy.
It appears to me that money can be found, in years of austerity in the UK, and all of a sudden the treasure chest has literally been broken open and spilled all over the deck of the ship. $2 trillion are being put into the U.S. economy if the Republicans and Democrats can come to a consensus of who gets the $2 trillion. Right
Yep.
now, I believe the Republicans are trying to funnel it into large companies. And the Democrats are saying, hey, like, wait a second here. The working people need support. Um, we have, again, this capitalistic society where the money that could have been used to prepare a business for these type of downturns related to these kind of risks, instead that money was spent buying up the shares of the companies like the airline industry to prop up the share value and ultimately reward the shareholders. So take all of this, boil it down, and let's suggest that from the 1960s to 2020 was an amazing time period, not unlike the invention of the automobile or the invention of the airplane, a society of excess, a society of success and growth.
Yep.
And 2020, what we're seeing, I think, is a sudden realization that the old days are over.
Oh yeah.
That
Yeah, new world order is in now, and
I think so.
yeah,
I hope so.
Well, we'll talk about a bit of the new world order and technology in a second. But at the end of this first round of the COVID-19 pandemic, there are going to be four types of people: those that have died, those that have got it, those that have recovered and have got some form of immunity, and those that have never had it. And those that have never had it are not protected until they get vaccinated. And the virus is still going to be around. So they're going to fall into one of those other three categories at some stage. And therefore, like any pandemic, there will be a second wave and possibly a third wave until everyone has either got it and built up that immunity or died from it. That's the scary bit. It's going to take more than 2 or 3 months for this to finish. It'll flatten the curve so that health systems can deal with it, but and deal with the casualties that are coming through within their current resources. But it's not going to go away.
Though, too, is these ridiculous fringe movements like the anti-vaxxing movement are probably going to be put to death finally as a result of this. Because I think right now that the fear of getting COVID is actually more dangerous than COVID itself, depending on your vulnerability profile, obviously.
Oh, very much so. And the number of people that are panicking out there. And what I'm seeing a lot of is that the reaction from a lot of businesses and stuff, instead of innovating and looking at a way forward, is they're using what I call the ostrich effect, which puts very vulnerable nether regions protruding out in places which unpleasant things could happen to if they don't sit up, take their heads out of the sand and start to move forward. And that's one of the other areas. And moving forward, we live in this technological world. Do you think people are properly utilizing the technology that's at their hands? Do they understand the implications it can have from a positive perspective for their businesses, but also do they understand the risks from a negative perspective?
Well, I think there's a lot of rush going on, and we all know that a successful military operation is slow is smooth and smooth is fast, right?
Yes.
And where we are right now is we have a business, especially businesses that hadn't made an investment in IT technology, were anti-work from home. All of a sudden, those businesses, in order to follow the government advice, are forced to quickly implement externally facing services and resources. A couple of points on that. If the business has been sort of atrophied in its technological investment, they are going to do this without the appropriate knowledge, and they are going to do it without the appropriate training, and they are going to do it without the appropriate equipment. And they are going to go up against actors who are absolutely ramping up at levels that have been unprecedented cyber attacks. So to those companies that have just decided, and I think it was something like 900 in the last count, according to Shodan, had now put their Outlook web access servers on the internet with no two-factor protection, with no VPN protection, they're going to get hurt.
Yeah.
For those companies that have decided that they're going to expose their other services, they are going to get hurt. If they haven't been patching and updating their boxes, or made an investment in robust antivirus, or implemented a lot of the best practices that we talk about with cybersecurity essentials, they're going to get hurt. So this, in a lot of ways, this pandemic situation and the business's response to it can be summed up as throwing chum into a water filled with sharks. And right now, the amount of port scans and vulnerability scans that is coming out of countries that we associate with high levels of cybercrime and advanced persistent threat actors, on top of the crazy amount of fraudulent activity, sort of cybercrime driven, but not cybercrime in itself. I'll give you an example. When the President of the United States announced about the potential of a malaria drug to be effective in treatment of COVID-19, within 4 to 5 hours, various fraudulent domains started popping up offering that drug for sale. 4 to 5 hours. I'm doing a lot of volunteer work here in the UK and in the United States. They've assembled essentially a dream team of some 800 of the top cybersecurity and cyber threat intelligence people in the world to tackle this. And at last count, there were over 60,000 fraudulent domains detected. And one of the problems that we're having is that there are a bunch of, I would say, well-minded individuals and organizations who are registering domains to provide legitimate sources of information or goods and services. But unfortunately, this was ill-conceived because the cyber criminals are doing the exact same thing. And so this is where we get to one of the primary messages that I want to underline is the government, the NHS, and the World Health Organization should be treated as the only legitimate sources of information regarding COVID and coronavirus. Everything else has the potential to be awful.
The potential, the amount of fake news that there is out there, the amount of, and it's more than just fake news, it's sensationalism that's there from people who don't quite understand what it is. But then again, if you're looking at the legitimate sources, your WHO, government, you look at the British government alone, there are so many links out there to try and go and bring all the little bits and pieces together. We rely on our media organisations to do that for us and try and give some form of overview. But again, the sensational bit is what sells media product, for want of a better way of describing it. And how we get around that is difficult.
It certainly is, yeah, and also to reach the common person, that language is what's used so that people take it seriously, right? It's sort of like the conundrum of the Daily Mirror, right? The Daily Mirror will report something like hundreds will drown from the latest tsunami to hit the coast of England. Okay. Well, that actually motivates people to get the hell out of the way and get to high ground, better than the government suggesting that there will be limited flooding in low-lying regions.
Exactly.
Right? But both are legitimate ways of portraying the message, but one is sensationalist and motivates people to do the right thing, and the other is dry and deadpan and lacking of, I would say, a call to action.
Yeah. So how do we get the message out to businesses and to individuals about the reality of the threat? Because cybersecurity traditionally has been based on scare the shit out of people and say that the sky is falling down, the good old chicken licking approach. Yet, whenever people look at their bank accounts after hearing massive data breaches and all the rest of it, most people find their bank accounts haven't been compromised. They're not losing money. Nothing seems to be happening. All the scaremongering. Do you think the cybersecurity community has got a way of getting the reality of the threat out without, again, using these scare tactics that I think people are bored of?
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more on this. This is our time to be heroes. This is our time to be leaders and talk in language that is educational and not sensationalist. And we saw initially when COVID-19, sort of broke into the mainstream news, we saw a lot of cybersecurity marketing departments capitalize on FUD. And send out emails, basically saying, we will save you. What businesses need to do is this really comes down to executive leadership. This comes down to savvy public relations people. I know several public relations people that are some of the best in the business. This is about communicating three important messages. One, follow the government advice. Two, the company is looking after the employee. And three, if you have questions, feel free to ask me and I will get you answers. That two-way communication is vital at this juncture.
Yep.
And of course there are going to be some businesses that have poor executive leadership, are not able to articulate to their employees what the plan should be. This is a very difficult time for those businesses. And quite frankly, I think many of them will not survive. I don't think High Street, for instance, will look anything like it did before this pandemic. I think we're seeing the final gasp of print media because no one's going out and buying newspapers anymore.
Yep.
Newspapers can't react fast enough to the online stories where everybody is going to consume. And don't forget, Boris Johnson has suggested that that all the elderly people who, to be honest, were big consumers of print media are to remain at home.
Yep.
So unless they have subscriptions and their delivery subscription carrier person is willing to brave a potential infection, I just don't see this surviving in any sort of state that we would recognize.
Yeah. So the online platform is the one thing that's going to come out of this. But what I'm seeing across the wider security industry at the moment is absolutely nothing. People aren't getting a grip of any of the new methods of getting information out and keeping the wider community informed. I think the events industry is going to change dramatically because are people going to want to go to big physical conferences and events and all the rest of it whilst there's still the danger of this virus out there before they've got a vaccination for it, or dangers of the next virus coming? What are the growths that you're going to see? You think you'll see out of the virtual world, and do you see us moving more towards a home-based virtual environment even more than we have done over the past few years?
Oh, absolutely. So a couple of things have happened is that in the knowledge-based industry, we have proved without a shadow of a doubt that work from home is viable. Work from home is agile, and work from home is resilient. Yep. And so when you look at those things that a business wants to do or a business wants to accomplish, I really feel those architectures, those software as a service, those collaboration tools, the collaborational tools that we're using to do this podcast, all of these factors are now part of the lexicon or the playbook, if you will, of building a business today. Yep. I think, we're seeing the transformation of restaurants into delivery. We are seeing the logistics and supply chain moving very quickly. Some would argue not quick enough. If you look at the grocers, like Sainsbury, Asada,
Yep.
and Tesco. All of them are struggling because overnight, and again, this goes to the government. Overnight, they are now feeding like 80% of the British population, as opposed to the 10% that they were feeding via delivery.
Yep.
Before that, and of course, I think, although I'm sympathetic, I got to be honest here. The stat came out that there's been $1 billion of revenue for the grocers before, as a result of the panic buying. I'd like to see a big portion of that $1 billion reinvested into employment for the black cabs and mans
Yep.
in a van
Yep.
that are currently unemployed in delivery, and building capacity on their web portals to take more orders faster.
Yep.
Because it's one thing for the government to say you should remain inside. It's quite a different thing to have all of the necessary support in place to make that a reality. And I think that's where the Delta was. I think that's where we're struggling. But I don't see this as a permanent problem. I see this as this is very quick evolutionary growth.
Well,
it's
all part
scale.
Yeah, it's all part of what should have been in their business continuity plans. The local resilience forums have pandemic as the number one threat. The government equivalents have pandemic as the number one potential threat that's in there. Businesses should have in their resilience plans, their business continuity plans, looked at that and put in there that the potential number one threat is people can't get in. A pandemic has closed the country down, and therefore should have thought it through in more detail. But many of them haven't, and they're trying to react quickly and incoherently. And I don't necessarily see that as government fault, because government has put it out there. There's elements of government departments haven't listened to their own threat receptions or threat reports that have been put out there, and I think it's this human thought that okay, it may be the biggest and baddest, but it's never going to happen, and therefore if we use the ostrich effect, then we'll get away with it. Hopefully in our time. We've now just proved that wrong.
Well, I think these type of questions are going to be front and center, and you already see these questions coming out in American politics. But I'm saddened by, I would say, either the cognitive dissonance or the willingness to forget the 10 years of austerity and cutbacks that basically eroded the resiliency capability at a national level. But when we really think about it, Philip, the thing that makes me kind of go a bit crazy is there was this discussion about, threats to national critical infrastructure.
Yep.
And then at the same time, you're sitting there at King's Cross, and because somebody had a leaf blower and there's a bunch of leaves on tracks, all the trains shut down on the East Coast to the West Coast line, right? So I kind of want to put this in that sort of larger perspective, in that, threats are all around us, and I think we need a certain level of demand, a certain level of government preparation and government direction, that the corporate desire for profitability and growth has to incorporate a social contract.
Yep.
And I think that social contract needs to be reinstituted for businesses. And it was interesting because one of the first moves the transport minister of the UK made was to essentially remove the franchises from the companies that were delivering train service. Essentially nationalizing them and essentially bringing it back to the days of British Rail.
Yes, as long as they don't bring the British Rail sandwiches back. But arguably, this actually puts the UK in a slightly stronger position because we're used to the trains not working, we're used to our internet connections falling down, we're used to the telephones not working, and therefore, from a national perspective, we've probably got an inbuilt level of resilience by the very fact that we're used to things just not working properly, whereas
Well,
a
I
lot
mean,
of other countries.
there were the 4 years where literally bombs were falling from the sky on major metropolises in
Yeah,
London,
yeah,
and it reminds me a bit of that because I had one day where I had no heat and or no water and no power because of a large water leak, and then I guess that got into the cables and shorted things out and shut down power. And I jokingly sent a text message that I didn't hear the German bombers overhead, but um, you know it's interesting because this is a country that arguably in World War I and World War II it suffered quite a bit from the Battle of Britain, the Blitz in World War I, and then the rocket attacks in World War II. There is a certain level of resiliency in the British character that I think is unique
yeah.
um, in a lot of ways, and it struck me as kind of a moment where the senior citizens of the country can impart some of their wisdom and, dare we say, frugality to this next generation who has taken, I think, a lot of things for granted. I know certainly my desire to travel, my desire to go to events and conferences in central London, all of that is shut down.
Yeah.
And I think I now have an appreciation for what a privilege that is and what an amazing place it is that we live in. And I fervently hope that we can return to those days again soon.
Yeah, well, but again, from our perspective as ex-military, this is just like being deployed out in operations, except people aren't shooting at you, trying to blow you up, and everything else. And we've actually we're better connected and we've got better entertainment. So it's no great difference. But to Joe Public out there, this is huge, absolutely huge, and it'll be interesting to see how the landscape changes once we start to get some form of normality, and it's going to be a new normality. It's not going back to the way it was beforehand. But getting back into the technology side of things, we're doing this on Zoom at the moment.
Yeah.
Are threat actors recognizing that there are opportunities out there for them to try and exploit all of this? And do you think that the bad guys or the good guys are winning at trying to protect things?
Well, it is right now a seesaw battle. From my insider perspective of being involved in both the UK cyber defense effort, volunteer effort, and the US cyber defense, I will say that the level of cyber attack is elevated. We are seeing a lot of actors. Certainly, I feel like home users now really very firmly in the sights of those bad actors, simply because they know that this is now a gateway into potential corporate environments.
Yep.
So whole address ranges are being scanned for vulnerability. I think telcos right now, I'll be very interested to hear about comments from the NCSCA and GCHQ about the stories that they can't currently tell, but they will tell a couple of years from now, and they will report on the huge surge in attacks and the fact that they are blocking and mitigating attacks. I know that as a result of these consortiums, including representations from American law enforcement and Canadian intelligence and law enforcement communities, we are tearing down bad guy infrastructure as fast as it is built up.
Yep.
We are turning cyber criminal infrastructure off when we can get a hold of the responsible parties. I would say that the responsible parties, especially the big players, are very accommodating, and there's a huge spirit of cooperation happening that in my lifetime, in my 20 odd years of security, comes almost as close to a NATO operation.
Mm-hmm.
in that everyone is focused on the mission, everyone is sharing information, and everyone is coordinating their activities and finding those critical points of contact for companies that are clearly, in some cases, completely overwhelmed by the level of malicious attacks that they're facing, and in a lot of cases unprepared.
Yeah. So how is it that the bad actors are managing to get so well coordinated and throw resources at it? Is it because they're all hostile nation state backed, or is it just because they're making so much money out of it? I can never quite get my head around why they are so far ahead of those that are trying to protect us against it.
Well, I think there's two motivators here. I think they've been coordinating their activities for quite some time, and they have been working more as a team than a lot of our sort of balkanized approach to information sharing and sort of vendor competition that led to situations of delayed disclosure and things like that. Microsoft made a really interesting decision that came out where they are stopping essentially on feature development, and they are just looking at building security patches and updates.
Okay.
This was an excellent move.
Yep.
I think it's in response to the fact that there was a 0-day that was being exploited by nation state actors, specifically with a component of Windows called the Adobe Type Manager.
Yep.
Yet another font-based 0-day attack that goes all the way back to Stuxnet.
Yep.
The ecosystem of the Windows font engine seems to be a very difficult to secure part of the Windows operating system, probably incorporating legacy code going all the way back to the NT 4.0 or 3.51 days.
Uh-huh.
So we're seeing a lot of coordination, and I think this is because it is truly turned into both a physical war against the virus and an online cyber war against a variety of different actors. And I think, I would suggest that this is profit driven,
Yep.
but it's also, there's also geopolitics involved as well. So we've got the full gambit from Iranian APT groups to Russian disinformation,
Yep.
to Chinese intellectual property theft, all of these to the North Koreans who are doubling their efforts to steal Bitcoin. So all of these criminal actors at the nation state level, and then also more entrepreneurial criminals, are all looking at this as an opportunity to disrupt and make as much money as possible.
So, in very clear terms, for people that are listening, are you saying that a lot of the companies that are out there where they've got people working from home are being targeted by serious and organized criminals in the cyber environment and potentially nation states as well?
Yeah, definitely. So spray and pray tactics are certainly being used, and let's sort of put them into the low, I'm going to say the low skilled attacker. Okay. And that level of noise, that level of signal noise of SMS phishing or smishing, and that level of phishing email that's being sprayed out there, obviously Office 365 Gmail and third-party email filters are working overtime to stop the tremendous amount of spam that could be anything from business email compromise attempts to, hawking test kits and COVID-19 vaccines, et cetera, et cetera. So let's call that sort of an upsurge in the in volume of attacks.
Yeah.
Underneath that volume is the stealth actors, the APT actors who are still taking orders from their central government to advance their national policies. If those national policies are anti-Western or particular governments or trying to steal intellectual property. Those are attacks going on. LinkedIn provides a good, I would say, a good target analysis,
Oh, yes.
OSI int capability.
Yeah.
Quite, knowing that vice presidents of product development, vice presidents of marketing and sales, all of those people are working from home. Potentially, those networks at home are not looked after, the IT department, and are not maintained to the same level of compliance or security. So definitely, we're going to see a pivot towards those type of targets, and those type of targets are going to be like hit
Yeah.
with extremely stealthy types of attacks, and we already saw this with the compromise of routers, domain names services,
Yep.
which led to a number of hacks and ransomware infections. So we can see this pivot taking place already.
So, as we get to the end of this, what would be the tips that you would give businesses and individuals who are now spread all over the place to the top things that they should be doing to make sure that they're secure? And what would be once normality starts to get back? What are the main things that you as a CISO, the chief security officers, the IT departments, cybersecurity departments should be looking at as they bring people back into their as close to the old style of working as they were beforehand when we get through this?
Yeah, so I think it starts with, have a plan, and hope is not a plan. So if you're going
Yeah.
to, if you need to open remote desktop services to people, right? You could do that, but don't do it and expose those RDP sessions to the entire internet. At least look at trying to geofence it or white IP address ranges. It's not the perfect solution, but it's a hell of a lot better than just turning it open to the entire internet.
Yep.
So, use your brain, think about what the business problem is, and come up with a reasonable solution. And then when you can get the licensing and maybe you can get a hardware upgrade in, then you have a plan to roll out two-factor authentication. Let me be really clear. A lot of the capability that you're building now as an IT department or security department will be with you in the post-pandemic era. Nobody, I think, is going to suddenly, turn all of that shit off, because to be honest, this is now the business resiliency approach. And this is not an exercise. This is a real deployment
Yes.
in real time. So, I tend to look at this as kind of saying, first of all, have a plan. Second, vet your plan amongst your community and your knowledgeable subject matter experts, right?
Yep.
Don't rush and don't think you know all the answers. Check the ego at the door, which the entire
Yes.
information security community is doing right now in a volunteer effort to try and keep businesses safe. You can do it too. So if you think it's a good idea, maybe get one or two people that have done something similar to sign off on it before you go rushing forward. The third thing is I think communicate to the business that we are being resilient, but at the same time, there's an increasing responsibility and onus on the employee to be very careful. Security tools are only as good as the human that is behind the keyboard. And I think when we look at the situation, we need to be calm, we need to be rational, and we need to help our users make the right decisions. And if that means temporarily turning a user's house into a branch office of your company, which means you are now going to take over the management of that. You may even have to ship them physical hardware to set up a point-to-point segregated network, depending on the risk model, then you need to do that. Or maybe you just need to send everyone that's working from home 5G hotspots. Like, think outside the box.
But not from Huawei.
Yeah, okay. Totally different problem. But I kind of feel like, simply deciding that you're just going to open your services and let any company asset participate on what could be an already previously infected and compromised network is just a horrendously bad idea.
Yeah. So it's a very interesting business continuity exercise when we're having to do it for real and learn on the hoof. I think on that point, Ian, it's been a real pleasure talking to you. I could sit and chat all day, but time is going to, and Zoom is probably going to zoom us out at some stage fairly soon.
I gotcha. It was my pleasure too. And I mean, these are the kind of issues and problems that, I think have the pandemic situation have brought to the surface. I think they've been always lingering there. But as I say to everyone, it's what you do now that you need to think about, because the sins of the past are just that. They're in the past. Look to the future and make good decisions moving forward.
Exactly. And if people wanted to get hold of you and Cyjax for advice, how do they do it?
ITT@cyjax.com is probably the best, but I'm all over social media at fat_hobbit with a PH. And also, of course, on LinkedIn under Ian Thornton-Trump.
Yeah, and look for the beer farmers and other areas, and that will all point towards you as well. But that's a different discussion, I think.
Indeed. Thank you so much, Philip. It's my pleasure today.
Ian, it's been a real pleasure.